Hey Spuddies, Potato McWhiskey here, and welcome to Crusader Kings 3. Huge thanks to Paradox Interactive for sponsoring this video, and if you want to get the game for yourself, there will be a link in the description of the video. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the game. There are essentially two start dates in Crusader Kings 3. You can start off in 1066, and each of these bookmarks gives you a choice of different characters, and these typically have a unique and interesting situation that they're in. The King of England is currently, I believe, at war with the King of Norway and the King of Normandy, or the Duke of Normandy, sorry, and they're basically trying to take over his kingdom. There's a plethora of different characters and different situations that you can play. The Countess of Zamora, I believe, is a vassal of the King of Leon, and you have to try to figure out a way to off all of your other dynasty members to ascend to the throne yourself. Now, each of these scenarios is very, very interesting. However, you can also just open up the map, jump in, and pick any character in the game that holds a title. So, for example, if I load up this game and zoom in, you can see I could play as the King of Bulgaria. Or I could click on any of these little flags inside of his realm to play as one of his vassals. So I could play as the Duke of Bulgaria. I could play as the Count of Terechi. I don't know how to say that. But in this particular game, I actually really want to play as the Magyars or the Magyars. And the reason I want to play that is because I've always found the idea of, the current Hungarian people being descended from this essentially, sort of tribal steppe horse nomad people who were running away from these other tribal steppe nomad people, and they found a mountain pass and were like, yep, let's go through that mountain pass and settle here, and this mountain will be our wall. So you basically just click play and the game pretty much immediately starts, and there's a lot we have to talk about. This game is so rich and deep, and I've got to say, I've already put, I want to say, like 40 maybe 50 hours into this game, and I'm only scratching the surface of what it has to offer. So if you're coming to this game with the perspective of a 4X player, like maybe a Civilization player, there's a lot to offer here. However, it's not quite a 4X game, but I do make the argument that this is a really interesting game for players who are looking for something in the sort of 4X kind of adjacent direction, but has a little bit of a different texture in terms of gameplay. Now, we're playing as Grand Prince Almos, and we have a wife and we have a son. This is my son Arpad. He is the heir to my throne, so if I die, he will take over. And you don't play as a single character in Crusader Kings, you play as a dynasty. So essentially, if I click on this little shield here, this is my house, and I am the dynasty head and the house head, because you can have a dynasty and then you can have minor houses that sort of branch off from it, and they all have their own hierarchy, because of course the medieval era is heavily defined by the structures of hierarchy and power. And so this game tries to emulate that. So if any of this is starting to appeal to you, you should consider going ahead and clicking on that link. Anyway, let's open up the dynasty tree. Now, starting off, it's pretty much just me, my son, and his sons. But time passes in this game and he will have more sons, his sons and daughters will have more sons and daughters. And this family tree can become massive. I'm talking 100 to 200 characters, all living in different realms, holding different titles. Some of them will have no titles. Some of them will be murdered by other characters because they have a title. There's going to be an entire wealth of intrigue and interest that you can kind of dig into and find out the history of a family that you essentially built. Now, to actually play the game, you have to kind of unpause it, but we're not going to unpause just yet because there's a few things we have to take care of. First of all, we have to pick a lifestyle for our character, and this is essentially like a skill tree. Basically, your character says, I am going to focus on war, or I'm going to focus on management of my realm. I'm going to focus on intrigue, spying, or befriending, or diplomacy. Like personal diplomacy, whereas diplomacy is more like state diplomacy. Intrigue is more like inter-character diplomacy. And then learning is all about religion, piety, and technology. So in this particular game, because I'm going to war early, I'm going to pick the martial lifestyle. Now, we already have the full gallant tree unlocked, and that's because this character is already 50-something years old. And so we can now pick a focus. We could be a strategic focus, which will give us a bunch of martial power, which means we're better at commanding troops and raising levies. We could also take authority, which is much better at expansion, controlling land. You can see that control growth. Control is a measure of how much authority you have in a province that you've taken over. And chivalry is basically your ability to fight in personal combat. Now, I already have a very gallant sort of outlook here, which means I have a lot of personal combat and stuff like that. And I like the idea of getting this advantage +5 because it makes us much better in combat as a leader of our army. So I'm going to take chivalry focus. I will select that. I can change it in 5 years, but I probably won't change it in 5 years. I can also get married. I already have a wife, but I can take some concubines. And you know what? I'll take a concubine for myself because I would like to have more sons. It can be a bit of a detriment to have more sons because then your lands get split up under more children. However, there is a positive effect because it means you have more people in your family, and the more people you have in your family, the more renown you gain, which allows you to unlock special unlocks for your dynasties. For example, one of them is that your dynasty is feared. They're more scary. Or you could, for example, your dynasty has a very great tradition of being warriors. You could have a dynasty that's really good at producing children. That's what fertility does. And each of these has their own unlock, and they unlock slowly, passively over the game. This is like your long-term sort of goal, is to like build up a really, really powerful dynasty. So what we're going to do is immediately take care of the fact that we have too few champions. So what I'm going to do is recruit any guests that I have in my court, because I don't need to be picky and choosy right now. I just need to fill out this 12 champion slots. Then I'm also going to invite some champions to my realm, which is basically, I send out the message that I'm looking for like able-bodied fighting men, and they should come to my realm to fight at my side. So I'm going to send the herald to call those guys. That will cost me a little bit of prestige to do that, but it's well worth it because there's 3 types of troops in the game. There's levies, which are your basic, peasants who've been thrown into combat with a spear and a shield, and then you have men-at-arms who are basically trained troops it is their career to be a soldier, and then you have knights, and these are like your heroes. They're extremely powerful. They can kill a lot of people. They can kill other knights quite easily as well if they're strong enough. Now we do need to keep an eye on our prestige because we are going to need to have 1,000 prestige to begin the crossing of the Carpathians. But the other thing we need to take care of is our man-at-arms, because we're going very war-focused. Now I need to create a man-at-arms regiment. Now I have access to these extremely powerful horse archers that have a really high attack, pretty good defense, and excellent pursuit, which is essentially chasing down enemies when they're fleeing, inflicting casualties, and screen, which is essentially doing the opposite, protecting us from people who are pursuing us. Horse archers are incredibly powerful. However, onagers are also really damn useful because they help you siege down holdings faster. So I'm going to get 2 copies of an onager and upgrade it to size 2. So I essentially have 2 onagers, and then I'll get 1 copy of a horse archer because I still need to maintain that 1,000 prestige. I still have to wait for these guys to reinforce, so I'll probably declare the war in about 10 months. Now, while I'm waiting for that, I'm going to go ahead and raise all of my troops. I'm going to detach these men-at-arms and disband them so that they can recover, and I'll just use my regular troops and my knights and stuff like that to do a bit of raiding. You can see here I've stepped my soldiers into foreign lands, and I'm now raiding this settlement. And over time, they will essentially generate progress and then steal the loot here and potentially even capture people as prisoners who I can sell back to the people that I raided for money or prestige or even hooks. I can generate hooks on them, force them into alliances with me because I captured their heir and stuff like that. Now that we've done a bit of raiding, our soldiers are carrying around loot. So let's bring those back, because once we walk back to our territory, we're going to get that as money as well as prestige, because it's essentially seen as a good thing. If you're a tribal government, if you go out and steal stuff from other people, everyone is like, yeah, look how badass those guys are. Now we have a problem. Someone is trying to raid us. Let's go ahead and raise all of our troops and combine them together and see if we can win this battle. Now, our quality, it's important to note here, we have slightly more troops than them. We also have a higher quality. That's what that little gold symbol there. We are elite quality, whereas they are only, I think it's regular quality. I can't remember how to tell the exact quality of their troops, but they're a lot lower quality than us. So our troops are higher quality and we have more. We also have a better commander with better traits, so we have a really good chance of winning this fight. Of course, there is a couple of dice rolls involved, so you never know. This is the combat screen. We have 8 champions versus their 4 champions. We have horse archers against their light footmen. Now they do have a good amount of these, but they haven't let them actually regenerate. We also have a decent amount more units than them, and we're inflicting a really good amount of casualties. In fact, they have routed already, and it's only been a few days of combat. Now, the nice thing about winning that combat is that that also gave us prestige, and because they were of a different religion, it also gave us piety, which is a sort of currency that you use to do religious actions. I love this little battle screen because I can go in and see exactly who is doing the damage. And you can see here, my horse archers killed a total of 145 people. Consider there was 81 of them, or 85 of them in total, and I had 1,000 levies, and they did almost as many kills as these essentially spearmen peasants. So horse archers are incredibly powerful. And then you look at my champions. I had 8 champions, and look at the total amount of casualties they inflicted. That is an insane amount. You can also see the main phase. You can see the horse archers actually didn't do a whole lot of damage in the main phase. That was mostly my champions and levies. But in the pursuit phase, my horse archers did an insane amount of damage. That's because they're really good at pursuing people down after they've already fled. So horse archers aren't so great for actually winning a fight, but they're incredible for making sure that you win the next fight. And of course, onagers I don't think really do much in a regular battle. They're mostly for sieges, so they didn't do a whole lot. We're going to dismiss that. We're going to disband our army. Once these guys go away. You can't disband when there's an enemy army around, because that would be kind of like, you know, you just, oh, my army disappeared on you. We will wait 1 more month until these guys are fully replenished, and then we'll set our sights on the Kingdom of Hungary in Carpathia. So we're going to, first of all, come in here. We're going to prepare to cross the Carpathians. This will cost me 1,000 prestige, and it will give me the Migrate to Pannonia Casus Belli. So we'll click that. And we get a little pop-up that tells us about the Great Migrations. We now have a Casus Belli against the Bulgarian Empire, which is essentially, a Casus Belli is a cause of war, a reason, a legitimate reason for us to go to war with them. So we'll go ahead and declare war with them of the Migrate to Pannonia Casus Belli. Now it says they're superior to us, but this is a special event war where we get some really powerful troop reinforcements. These are the hosts that we get. Now we lose these when our leader dies, if I remember correctly. So we want to win this war pretty quickly, and we don't want to put our leader at risk. However, I'm going to raise all of my regular troops and keep these guys essentially in reserve to just keep me from losing too many troops. They essentially are there as shock troops to join a battle that we may potentially lose. We also just got a random event, and this game is filled, and I mean filled with random events. It could be anything from somebody getting murdered, someone trying to join your court, someone leaving your court, someone trying to seduce you, someone trying to romance you. Yes, those are different things, because one of them just has a very clear goal in mind of getting you into bed, and the other one is trying to turn you into their lover. It could be anything from, a fight breaks out in your war camp. Now, this particular guy is Richard von Adams, and he's actually a pretty good warrior, so I might want to embrace him into my court. And he's also Catholic, and if we want to make the decision to convert to Catholicism later, it would be good to have this guy, because we could have him educate our children, who will then convert to Catholicism, and then we can convert the country to Catholicism. And that might be something useful to do, because we're currently in 1868, which means there's still the potential for an awful lot of crusades from the Catholic and possibly even the Orthodox nations. I don't know if the Orthodox nations can actually participate, but I think they can do holy wars as well. We would essentially be, some heathens on the border of like the Catholic territory, so it might be in our advantage to actually switch. Now, we could also make the decision to try to keep our own religion of Taltosist, but it might be more fun to convert to Catholicism. I also have a bunch of new knights ready to join my realm. Now, they can be a bit expensive, but that's why we went on that raid, to raise a bit of money. I'm going to force him to be a knight. Now I have 3 extra champions that I can raise here, who I will join into my army. And now I have 1,400 troops, 11 knights. And remember, these knights are extremely powerful, especially when they have high combat stats like that new guy that we just got. But now that we have these guys, we're going to begin the sieging process. We have onagers, which is really damn useful, because it means we're going to be able to siege down territory exceedingly quickly. We also got ourselves another champion. Let's go ahead and raise that champion as well. We'll swap over into the champion screen. This guy has come, he cost me 5 gold, I will recruit him, I will force him to be a knight and then allow him. Force just gets him to do it immediately, and then I can raise him as a knight and he'll go rejoin this army. Now, on his own, he's extremely weak, because he kind of needs to have those levy troops around him to keep him safe, but when he joins up with this army, he will be exceptionally powerful. Since we're sieging down territory, we are going to have to talk about how sieging works. Basically, each province has a fort level that gives it a defensive rating, which means it'll dictate the number of days it will take to siege it down. It also has other modifiers that, I think the terrain can affect things and stuff like that. And then my army generates a certain amount of siege progress per day, depending on my perks, traits, and whether or not I have any siege weapons in my army. And sometimes their walls will be too strong for the siege weapons that you have, so you have to be careful about that. Right now, my onagers are perfectly fine for sieging this down, so we're almost getting twice as much siege progress as we normally would, which means we're breaking these down twice as fast as we normally would. Sieges are probably one of the most important parts of combat that you're going to want to pay attention to. I'm also going to put some commanders in charge of these hosts. I'm going to put my son in charge of the 3,000 host, and then I will put that guy who I just hired in charge of that host right there. So they're coming through trying to siege down my own territory, and that's why I have these guys back here as well. They're going to protect them. These 2,000 troops are probably going to protect my territory until I'm at least somewhat into Pannonia. And now we've also managed to get another event. Many treaties have been written on the honourable conduct in war. So I have a choice now. I can do an intrigue challenge, which will give me some martial lifestyle experience if I passed it, and it would increase the amount of casualties I can do to my enemies and give me a defender's advantage for 5 years. But if I fail, I'll lose some prestige and I'll gain the foolish nickname. But because I'm just, this option is sort of unjust, and that will give me some stress. And stress is really, really important because your character's traits like ambitious, gregarious, just, and calm are all going to affect how much stress you gain, and what decisions you make will affect that too. So for example, because my character is calm, if I make an option that is very, like, explosively angry, that's going to give him stress because he's acting out of his own character. And what that means is once you build up enough stress, if you played like Darkest Dungeon, for example, you could have a mental break, and this can have large, heavy, long-term consequences for that particular character. Now, it does go away when they die and you transition to your heir, but still, you want to be careful about how much stress that you gain. I could take practice hit and run here, which means we get less casualties. I like that fatal casualties reduction, actually. So I think I'm going to go ahead and say hit and run tactics will wear my foes down, and each and every single one of the pop-ups in this game, like the little event pop-ups, have an interesting choice like that, where you have to choose between, oh, do I gain stress? Do I take a more powerful ability? Do I lose money and gain prestige? Do I lose piety and gain prestige? There's all these different, like, sort of areas where a decision is going to be affected. We have sieged down 2 castles. Well, they're basically tribal villages that we're sieging down right now, because their main castles aren't actually on the fringes of their empire. They are on the inside. You can see here, this is a castle holding and has a city and a temple. Whereas out here, these are basically just tribal people sort of living off the land. Looks like we have managed to catch our enemy, so we have a good chance of winning a decisive battle here because they are split up. So they are starving as well, but they do have a better commander, but we have more soldiers and they're a higher quality. So if we can get them to rout, because we have so many horse archers here, all of their armies are going to take insane damage. Now, the quality of our troops is quite low, but they're already retreating and we're already into the pursuit phase, so we're already inflicting massive casualties. In fact, I think we wiped them. No, I don't think we wiped them, but we did an insane amount of casualties thanks to the horse archers. There wasn't even a pursuit phase, actually. I was wrong. I think we did wipe them. Now, they're already locked in to come join combat with us, but this time we're defending the river. We were able to snipe their rear guard, and now we have a river crossing in our favor, and they're starving, so this should be a very easy fight for us. That's it. We completely stack wiped them. Holy crap. I've played this game for a while and I've never seen a stack wipe. I think we absolutely just obliterated their entire army. In fact, we already have a 55% war score against a giant kingdom that had originally like 4,000 troops, and now they have 0. So that pretty much tells me I've already won the war. Okay, well, I'll be back once I've sieged down everything. The really cool thing is we've actually managed to pick up some prisoners from those battles, because we basically slaughtered the entire armies. And so what that means is we found some people to arrest. Now, you don't like take prisoner people who don't matter. You kind of just, you let them go or you slaughter them or whatever. But people who do matter, like a prince right here, he's worth selling for 100 gold. Now, I do want to be careful that he's not giving me war score, and he isn't. So he's not important enough in the war to keep. So I'll just go ahead and ransom him, get myself 100 gold, and then I'll leave this guy to his fate. We can, of course, if we want, execute him, but because we're a just person, if we don't have a good reason to execute someone, we actually get stressed out. So I'm going to leave him where he is, even though he's a heathen or a heretic. We have another event. This is one where my horse has taken up a bit of a scare, and I have to try and do a challenge here to see if I can get him under control. Now, I can choose to try to fight the horse and get him under control, or I can choose to jump off the horse. If I jump off the horse, I'll lose prestige because people will see this as like a cowardly action. But if I try to fight him and keep him under control, I could potentially be wounded in the encounter. I'm going to take the chance of being wounded, and it looks like I succeeded. Now I get the trait Experienced Rider, which makes my light cavalry better in combat, and I also got 100 experience towards my lifestyle, which I have now unlocked a perk in. I'm going to talk a little bit about the perks in here. So for example, one of the perks is Bellum Justum. This is just war, essentially. What it does is it makes it cheaper for you to actually declare the war on an enemy, because there is a currency associated with it. I think it's if you're declaring on people of your own faith, you have to use piety, because it's an irreligious thing to do. And if you're declaring on people of another faith, you have to use prestige, because you have to basically like convince people that you are important enough to, you know, deserve to declare war. We could also pick up a man's home, a strict organization. This is overseer is more about actually controlling and holding the land, and strategist is more about actual warfare. And I think we'll be doing a lot of warfare in this. So I'm going to take bellum justum, because that'll mean I'll be able to declare about twice as many wars, if not more. Ooh, looks like we managed to catch some raiders off guard. They're going to move in and attack me, and I'm hoping that they actually have money on them that I can steal. No, they didn't have any money on them, so I wasn't able to steal it. So that's a bit unfortunate. But I did capture one of their people, and I can now go ahead and sell them. So I didn't pick up their loot, but I did capture an important person in their realm, who I will promptly ransom for a sum of gold. We did indeed. Oh my goodness. I think we captured someone who's important to the war. Yeah, we captured the heir to the throne in that battle, which means we get an extra 25% war score, which means we don't actually have to capture that much more territory in order to force a peace. So we should be able to force a peace here very, very soon, because we've won an insane amount of battles. We're already occupying. Now, we are controlling the actual war goals, so that's hurting our war score. But still, capturing an heir to the throne is incredible. That's this guy right here, Prince Rasate. Now, if I wanted to, I could just execute him if I wanted to be a massive evil bastard, but I think I will keep him because he's very, very valuable. I will, of course, sell off other people if they're worth it. Our enemies have surrendered, so now we are the rulers of Pannonia, a new independent kingdom, basically where Hungary is. This has a lot of consequences on the game. First of all, our religion, I think because of the special event, basically we abandon this land and then someone else moves in. But now, this land follows our religion of Taltosis. Not only that, but it has our culture of Magyar. And I think there is a button you can press. Yes, right here. Promote Christian settlements. This right here gives us the ability to convert to Christianity, which I think is what we're going to do. Now, the hard part is remembering, is there a way I can do this with my own guy? I'll have to try and figure out how to convert to Christianity, or else one of my descendants will have to do it. But the very first thing that we want to do is get rid of all this land, because you can see here, there's going to be like these little blue labels on the land, and that basically means that I own it. I am now controlling this land. And it would probably be a good idea for me to not control so much of the land, because I can only efficiently control about 4 of these pieces of territory. Now, my main capital duchy is in Visegrad, so I don't mind if I control the land over here. But definitely in my other duchies, I'm going to want to perhaps parcel that land out to loyal vassals who will help me expand and also administer this territory. The first thing I will do is look up the Duchy of Transylvania, and I'll look around and see if there's anyone I can grant this land to. Now, I want to pick somebody I really like as my sort of, duke in this area. So I'll go ahead and look through my vassal list here. And I want to find somebody who I think will manage the land well and be really, really loyal. And it looks like Leved Banfi is a good target. So I'm going to go ahead and grant him these 3 parcels of land right here. And this will make him a powerful vassal in this area. And then he will now demand, you can see here, he wants the de jure duchy of this area. But before I give him the duchy, I want to make sure that I parcel off the other bits of the land to other people, so that he has to worry about people underneath him. Because just like I'm going to have to worry about the vassals who report to me. And the best way I can show this is if I click on my little flag here, you'll see these little lines that are coming out to me. Those are people who are my vassals. And what I want to do is make sure that he has to worry about me, and he has people underneath him to worry about, so he can't just like go around being super powerful and challenge my authority. So I'll give away this land to probably unimportant people who I don't really care about interacting with. That way it doesn't affect me that they essentially leave my court and go join the court of one of my dukes. So now I will grant this man the Principality of Transylvania. Now, all of the people who are underneath him in this land, I no longer have to worry about. I just have to deal, when I want to deal with this territory over here, I just have to deal with this guy, Prince Leved of Transylvania, and he's extremely loyal and happy with me because I just gave him a ton of land and vassals. So like I said, I'm going to go through and look for each piece of land to give away, because I need to give away another 5 pieces of land before I'm like relatively okay. With one final piece of land to give away, I will give that to Moog. And there we go. We have given away all of our land to the point now where we only control 4 pieces of land ourselves directly. We do have Chieftain Ambrose, who is our big friend. We have 1 duke and a bunch of smaller vassals. I think I'm going to hold on to these duchies myself, because it looks like people don't hate me that much for holding them. Although I could, if I wanted to, I could just give them over to I could give this one to to Count Orkhan, right? I give him the Principality of Thames, and now I only have to deal with a few less people. Now, the important thing about my vassals is they all owe me something. I am their rightful liege, so they owe me either money or troops, and they will supply both. Now, these guys consider me not to be their rightful liege. Is that because the Duchy of Bihar hasn't been created? Yes, it is. So I'm going to go ahead and create the Duchy of Bihar, which is going to cost me 125 gold, and it will give me 300 prestige. And what that will do is that will make me their de jure leader. They will essentially recognize my right to be their lord. Now, they might not recognize it fully because they hate my guts, but it does mean that because I'm their rightful liege, they're going to owe me more tax and levies because I have a more legitimate claim to be like, hey, listen, give me more money, raise more troops for me. I'm going to try to grab more land. There's a whole bunch of people around here who I could take land from, in particular inside the Empire of Carpathia, which is my eventual goal. I want to be an emperor. I want to control multiple kingdoms and be an emperor, which means it'd probably be a good idea to declare war on Bukovina. In particular, I'm going to declare war for the control of this duchy, although there might be someone easier that I can declare war on, because right now, my land doesn't give me a whole lot of troops. If I click on this, for example, I show you, because my control is so low, and it's like the wrong culture and stuff like that, I'm actually not getting that many troops from this. So it might be a good idea for me to quickly just invest a bit of money in here to gain some more levies and tax. So I'll go ahead and upgrade that tribal hold. This is my capital, of course, so I definitely want to be upgrading my capital, and I think I'll also grab my marshal and tell him to increase my control in this area so that I can sort of solidify my power base. I've actually spotted a fantastic opportunity to go to war with the kingdom to my north, Great Moravia. They're very, very weak right now because they're currently defending against a war for Upper Silesia. So if I choose to go to war with them right now, it'll be a very easy war to take the Duchy of Nitra. So let's go ahead and declare war on this guy for the Duchy of Nitra, which will be a huge chunk of this empire that we're trying to build. Technically speaking, I'm not really ready for another war because I want to let my realm settle, but this guy is so not prepared for a war that it's like just an obvious choice. Managed to catch what remains of his army in the hills of Eger. So he should be able to jump in here, smash these guys readily. They should even be fully routed, which would allow me to capture an heir possibly, or just completely ruin them. And that'll give me a huge amount of the war score that I need to actually occupy Nitra. There's also been a camp dispute here. Now I have the choice of delivering a speech about unity, or whipping the people that are fighting, or just fecking off and leaving it. But I think because these two options give me stress, I'm going to do the skill challenge, which does have the potential to lose me prestige, but it could also make people like me and give me prestige. So let's see what the outcome is. Excellent. So I actually won the skill check. And it's a bit like D&D, you sort of roll a dice and see if you win, and then you get rewards. I got a bit of prestige, I got a bit of martial experience, and people like me more. And again, the whole game is filled with these sorts of little events that are really, really fun to interact with. I've already more or less explained how the war works, the war mechanics work, and it's not a super engaging thing, and I want to try to cut down how much this video is, because there is an employee at Paradox who has to actually watch this, and I want to show you guys a little bit more of the game. Ooh, we got a very interesting event. My chancellor, I believe it is, who has been working in diplomacy, has a small chance to sort of legitimize my cause to war with this guy. After you declare war to someone and you win a war, you have a short period of truce, depending on like how long it can be. It can be like about 5 to 10 years, I think it is. But this guy has actually managed to make it so that I could declare war immediately again if I wanted to. Brilliant. We have successfully won the war. We killed their army, we occupied a bit of the territory, and now they're surrendering because they basically see themselves as completely defeated. I will gain some fame from this, which will increase my level of fame to be from illustrious. I'll be on the pathway to exalted among men, and your level of fame dictates a lot of things like how much people like you and how many knights you can recruit. So right now I'm illustrious, so I get 2 extra knights, and people like me a bit more. But I think Living Legend is the final level, so people like you a lot. This is basically, if you get the Living Legend, you've had a pretty successful run as that character. So let's go ahead and force end the war. We grab ourselves some more territory, and we are at 13 out of 4, which means we have to parcel off even more land. But the more important thing is that we're a step closer to uniting the Kingdom of Pannonia, and a step closer to forming the Empire of Carpathia. Now, raiding is really, really important to do as a tribe because it's your main way of actually generating income and prestige that you can then use to actually build up your territory and go to war. So just by raiding these few little provinces here, we managed to pick up 49 gold, which will also translate into prestige. And oh no, my wife died, and that's going to give me some stress. It does, however, mean that I can get remarried. Let's see, is there anyone really good skills? Because I'm not really looking for someone young to have kids with, but if I could find someone who is like young and had good skills, like relatively young and had good skills, this will hurt my prestige, but her skills are so good that I'm willing to accept this sort of unprestigious marriage, because it'll mean that she'll provide me with a lot of stats here, you know, 5 diplomacy, martial, all that sort of stuff. Plus, I'm already an extremely prestigious person, so I have that prestige to spend if I want. Now, the Duchy of Great Moravia is basically ripe for the pickings, because I was just at war with them and slaughtered their entire army, so now I can just swoop in and raid them for cash. Somehow, my wife, Grand Princess Katarina, gained the trait pregnant. I accidentally misread her age. I thought she was like much older than 45. I didn't think she would be having any kids, but I'm actually kind of okay with this because she has the trait genius. Now, traits like genius are congenital, which means they can be passed on to your children. So if I have a bunch of children with her, they might come out as geniuses, and they have a lot of advantages. They get +5 to all stats, as well as earn experience 30% faster. Now, that 30% experience is a huge deal, because you consider the maximum rank of a particular sort of lifestyle here, brilliant strategist, this is my education trait, gives you 40%. So if you're able to get both of these, you basically level up your skill tree twice as fast. It's exceptionally powerful, the genius trait. And there's even, actually, if you go into your house tree, there's a special legacy you can pick up called Noble Veins, which increases the chance that you will inherit good congenital traits and increases the chance that new congenital traits will just appear out of thin air. Our army comes home victorious from looting the Duchy of Great Moravia, or the Kingdom of Great Moravia, and we're walking home with another 60 gold in our bank. That 60 gold has a lot of uses. For example, we could go on a pilgrimage if we wanted to. That's basically like a religious retreat where we pick up a bunch of piety, which can increase our level of virtue or devotion. Higher levels of devotion basically make religious characters in your empire like you more. They can have other effects too. For example, certain skill trees in the learning thing here, I believe it's, let's see, scholarly circles. You get extra learning depending on how religious you are. But I haven't even touched on the tech system and all that sort of stuff, and I think that might be what I touch on now. This is my religion screen, and this is the culture screen for the Magyars. And basically how the tech system works is that your culture is the sort of nexus of all technology. You can see here, if I click on Russian, they have different technological unlocks compared to Magyar. You don't have to know exactly what they are, but just if you can see that these highlights change. Now, we're currently developing crop rotation from exposure. We're getting exposure from the Bulgarians over here because we are adjacent and near them. And we also, I think it's, if we share a religion with them, I think it'll give us even more. But because we're basically close to them, we're getting a bunch of progress towards crop rotation. Because my leader is fascinated with the city planning, and we are the most powerful Magyar leader of that culture, we get to choose how our culture advances. It's very slow, it's very passive, and it takes time, but it is really, really important to keep track of your culture, because in order to become a feudal society, right now we're a tribal society, we're going to have to unlock basically all of these tribal inventions. And the way that we do that is by developing our territory. Each province in the game has a development stat that we should be trying to increase. If I go in here to my council, I can talk to my treasurer / steward and tell him to increase the development in my capital county. And that's basically a mission where he sits here and he tries to build up infrastructure like houses and farms and roads and all this sort of stuff. And by increasing that development, we unlock technology faster. How development works is a little bit interesting. If I go here to the development map mode, you can see the deeper purple colors are areas of low development, and then the kind of yellower areas are where there's high development. So if I look at Rome right here, it is a 25 out of 100 development, which means it's pretty well developed. And how development works is that it radiates outwards. So you can see here, this is a very highly developed province, and all of its development power is radiating out to nearby provinces. So this is 25, this is 11, and this one will increase based on the difference between those two. So my goal right now is to try to develop my capital province, which will then increase its own development and then radiate out its own development to my own culture, which will then, in the long run, increase my ability to research technology. Whenever I'm going to the tech screen, I accidentally click on the religion screen, and it always annoys me. And it's like just something that I do. It's like there's nothing wrong with the game. It's just me being dumb. So now that I've played the game for a while, I've talked about the game systems, I'm going to give you my opinion on it from the perspective of someone who primarily plays 4X games. Now, when I first played Crusader Kings, it was all the way back, I want to say it was like 2000 and something, when Crusader Kings first came out, like 2012 or something. I just randomly picked up the game and I really fell in love with it. It was unlike anything I've ever played. It had that feel of like a 4X kind of game where there was these massive empires and you take over provinces and there was bits of land. But I had this kind of grounded feeling of being in a more real world. Like, you know, Civ definitely has references to the real world, but you're basically playing like an immortal leader leading a sort of an abstract nation. Whereas this, you know, Crusader Kings and Europa Universalis 4 and games like that, they all felt like I was kind of somewhat in the real world, which really got me going because I'm a huge fan of history. I'm a huge fan of all that stuff, and especially I'm really fascinated by like the medieval era, although mostly. Don't tell this to Paradox though, because Victoria 2 is easily the best Paradox game ever made, despite the fact that it's a broken, buggy mess, because I'm also incredibly interested in the Victorian era. Is this a game for Civ players? Now that's actually a really, really tough question to answer, because I think it's going to be the sort of game that some Civ players really appreciate. If you're the kind of player who likes depth and complexity and like little interactive systems that kind of do their own thing, you're going to love this game. But if you're a player who sometimes get frustrated by like random events and things not being in your control, and especially if you're the kind of player who can't handle taking setbacks, I know, look, there's a meme in the Civ community. It's like you lose one warrior and then you restart the game. But if you're that kind of player, this might not be the game for you, or at the very least, you might have to temper your expectations and change how you view the game, because a setback in Crusader Kings isn't a game over. It's just a little arc of the story of the dynasty that you're telling, because there's like 600 years that you're going to be playing through, and a character you might only be in control of them for 30 of them. So even if that character is set back, that means you still have like 500 years to achieve your goals, because there is no win condition in this game. A setback doesn't really matter in the same way it does in Civ. You know, if you lose a spaceport, that could be game losing. But if you lose a war in Crusader Kings 3, it might put you in a bad position, but you still have land, you still have territory, you can still expand, you could swear fealty to someone stronger than you. There's always options when you get set back in Crusader Kings 3, and I think that's a really important distinction. If you're the kind of player who really wants to get the grips with some interesting mechanics and are looking for something with a bit of a different texture and feels more like a simulation than maybe a Civ game would, I would 100% recommend this game for you. If you're the kind of player who just wants a more relaxed arcadey experience, Civ does actually attract both those kinds of players, and that's an important distinction that we have to make in the community. There's people who really like how cutesy the game is and how cool it is to just be leading an empire, and then there's the people who want to be like, oh man, but if I place my worker here, the city will grow in 15 turns, and I feel like Crusader Kings appeals a little bit more to that crowd mechanically, but I also feel like the game appeals to the arcadey crowd, because if you get to grips with the UI and mechanics, you can have this incredibly rich, deep and satisfying story for when you play the game. One thing, here's my advice if you are going to try to pick up the game. Stick to a save file. Don't keep restarting, because that's what I did for a long time, and yeah, I was having fun playing the game, but I never got that satisfaction of really building up an empire and a thing. I would say try to stick to a save file for at least a couple hundred years. And I would also say that if you suffer a setback, don't immediately go to the reload screen. Don't immediately go to the restart screen. I know, look, we're all notorious for doing it. Sometimes you're having a bad day and things aren't going your way and you have to just go, that's it, right? I lost a city, that's it, game over, I'm playing, Factorio. But I recommend, this is the sort of game that really, really benefits for you to just kind of sit there and experience it. And it's fair enough, not everyone is going to be emotionally in the mood to do that, or even psychologically. Maybe you're working hard, you're coming home from the day and you're like, man, I just want to play some video games, and it's like, I really don't want a game that demands a lot from you. And Crusader Kings 3 does ask a lot from you, but it's actually a lot easier and more chill to play than Crusader Kings 2 is. There is a lot of depth and richness in the game, but it's kind of up to you if you want to interact with them. You can kind of just play this as a map painter if you want. Or you can play it as a game of intrigue where you're interacting with characters and you're building up your territory efficiently, and you're expanding, and you're creating dynasties and houses, and you're converting religions, creating the perfect min-maxed micromanaged religion, or creating a religion that just flavor wise meshes with you, because there's so many options when it comes to religion. You can have a religion where males are preferred or women are preferred, or equality. You can outlaw different sorts of sexual orientations, or you can make them encouraged. There's like the whole religion system has a sort of what's the word? It's sort of a crumbliness, not a crumbliness, but there's like this sort of crunchy texture to all of the game's mechanics, in that depending on the type of player that you are, you can be like, man, I really want to do a role play game, or you can be like, man, I want to do a min-max game where I want to take over the world, I want to convert everyone to my culture, I want to build up fully maxed out castles in every single province, I'm going to absolutely have every single piece of land correctly owned by the correct de jure leader, there's going to be one emperor, it's going to be me, I'll be the god king. And like that's the thing about the game. You can approach it however you want, and you're going to have an amazing time. So that's my opinion. Crusader Kings 3, highly recommend you give it a shot if you can. I love you all very much, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.